I used to think silence meant peace. The phone buzzed twice then, once more, like it wasn't sure if it should insist. I flipped it over, screen half lit from sleep mode. The family group chat had 6 new messages. None of them started with my name. Jake had written, "Emily, don't forget the old insurance file. Dad wants to review it again." Dad replied a few minutes later with a photo of the backyard layout chairs arranged in perfect symmetry. Mom followed with a picture of a glass vase tulips in the middle, flanked by 2 white taper candles. Thinking this for the table. No one tagged me. No Lauren Ewan. Hey, can you bring... I scrolled further past emojis and confirmations. The conversation flowed around me like a stream around a stone, intentional or not. I typed slowly, "Do I need to bring the trust papers for Grandma's estate?" The typing bubble blinked once, then disappeared. Nothing. I didn't write again. The next morning, I folded a receipt from the dry cleaner into quarters, slid it between 2 unpaid invoices, and stared at the corner of the room where the sun never reached. That's when the call came. Emily's name flashed on screen, still saved under the nickname she hated, E.M. Storm. Her voice was clear, clipped at the edges. "Hey, Lauren, just so you know, Mom and Dad thought it's better if we kept this meeting within those directly involved." I leaned against the counter. "Am I not directly involved?" She exhaled long and even. "You're always so... detached. It's probably for the best." The line didn't disconnect right away. We both let the air stay heavy for a moment. Then the screen went black. I placed the phone face down and reached for the mug I hadn't touched. A pale stain the shape of a comma had dried along the rim. The tea was cold, the silence colder. Detached. That word hung in the air like the smell of wet laundry left too long in the machine, lingering unnecessary, a little cruel. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't leave the group. I didn't ask again. The old drawer in the hallway still held a blue folder labeled Ashford, Estate and Legal. I opened it once. The edges had curled from years of being untouched, like they'd been waiting for someone who wouldn't come. The papers inside bore my name. Or they used to. I remembered how Dad once referred to that folder at a Thanksgiving dinner. That's just in case. But really, most of it's sorted between Jake and Emily. Mom had nodded eyes on her wineglass. Lauren doesn't like dealing with paperwork. It overwhelms her. I had been sitting right there, the only one not holding a drink, the only one who had already digitized the entire family archive in a Google Drive they never used. Back then, I let it slide. There was a birthday, 1 year, I don't remember whose. Emily brought wine. Jake showed up late but with balloons. I arrived early with a slideshow I'd made from old home videos. No one asked to watch it. "Play it later," Mom whispered, waving her hand. We never did. That slideshow still sits on a flash drive, tucked behind my passport. After Emily's call, I didn't eat. Not out of drama, just a kind of inertia. I sat at the edge of the bed, bare feet, touching the hardwood eyes, tracing the groove where my old desk chair used to roll. Detached. It was the kind of word people used when they wanted to sound generous while withholding, like calling someone unique when you mean out of place, like she means well when what you really mean is she doesn't belong. When I was 8, I built a calendar app using clip art and PowerPoint because no one ever remembered my science fair dates. It printed automatically every Sunday. The paper jammed every second week. Dad once glanced at it and muttered, "You could have just told us." So I stopped printing. And eventually, I stopped reminding. Somewhere in that silence they decided I was fine on my own. I checked the group chat again hours later. It had moved on to discussing catering options. Emily had written Jake Dad's allergic to walnuts. "Don't order that salad again," he replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Then another image, a mock-up of the seating chart. There were 10 names around the main table. Mine wasn't there. I closed the app. I didn't delete it, just closed it. The old nameplate from my first job still sat at the back of the bookshelf. Lauren Ashford Systems Analyst. The print had faded, and a fine crack ran through the plastic. I hadn't looked at it in years. I touched the surface with my thumb, not to remember, just to prove it still existed. No one had asked what I was doing lately. Not since I moved west. Not since I'd registered Ashford Systems under just L. Whitlow in the press releases. I hadn't lied. They just never asked. The group chat never pinged again that week. The meeting must have happened. Someone probably brought the tulips. Someone else brought the trust papers. Maybe even the estate folder. It didn't matter. What mattered was what no one noticed. That the screen never lit up with my name. And no one seemed to miss it. I didn't respond. I didn't reintroduce myself. Not every absence is loud. Some erase you quietly until even the echoes stop trying. I used to think usefulness would earn me space. There was a Saturday when I stayed behind to wash dishes after Jake's graduation party. The others drifted out to the porch plates, still half-full napkins wilted from lemonade. I stacked cold chicken bones and wiped away barbecue sauce that had already set into the plastic. No one asked me to do it. No one noticed I had. The next morning, Mom mentioned how nice the backyard looked. Emily stayed late to help fold the gift bags, she said. There had been no gift bags. I mailed Jake's college applications the day before they were due. He was late to fill them, so I typed the answers as he paced, muttering about football practice and deadlines. When his acceptance letter came, he posted a photo with the caption, "Wouldn't have made it without my coach and Emily." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I clicked like. When Dad had his minor stroke, I left a pitch meeting in Chicago and caught the last flight home. The guest room was full of expired magazines and broken blinds. I slept on the couch, made oatmeal in the mornings, checked his blood pressure before Mom woke up. On the third day, I refilled the prescription and left a note on the fridge. "Call me if he gets dizzy again." The note was still there a week later, folded under a magnet that said, "Bless this mess." I flew back and no one asked how the trip had gone, or if the meeting in Chicago still stood, or if I was tired. At Thanksgiving, 2 years ago, I brought a bottle of Brunello from a vineyard I'd visited during a work retreat in Siena. I carried it in a protective sleeve all the way from Italy. I placed it beside the cranberry sauce with quiet ceremony. Mom glanced over while lighting a candle. Emily brought the nice roses, she said. How thoughtful. I looked at the wine. No one opened it. We drank boxed Pinot instead. The Brunello sat untouched on the counter until I quietly took it back home. When I was invited to speak at a non-profit conference in D.C., I messaged Mom a photo of the badge clipped to my blazer. The caption read, "Keynote Tech for Public Health Access." Her reply came 3 hours later. "Remember to bring a jacket. Weather's crazy out there." That winter, I wore the same coat I'd had since grad school. The pockets had ripped seams and held a thumb drive wrapped in tissue paper. The lanyard from the event still hangs behind my door. No one in the family ever asked what I spoke about. There was a Christmas when I brought hand-knit scarves for each person, labeled in small tags with their initials. Emily's was cream with flecks of silver. Jake's was charcoal with a single burgundy stripe. Mom's was dusty rose. At dinner, Emily pulled hers from the bag and held it up. "This reminds me of the one I lost in Paris," she said. "That one was cashmere." Jake didn't unwrap his until the end. He left it in the corner of the armchair when they went out for drinks. I saw it there when I collected the plates. The tag had slipped off. At some point I stopped wrapping gifts with bows, just tape and paper, nothing that required a reaction. I kept showing up, quietly. If the piano bench needed dusting, I did it. If the potato salad was too salty, I offered to fix it. I stood at the side table and made sure everyone had water. I folded chairs. I made space for coats. I left before being asked. There was a stretch of years when I believed that if I didn't challenge the room would make room for me. Emily never asked for attention. She received it like steam finds the highest point of a kettle, inevitable and unbothered. One time during a backyard brunch, she brought a blueberry tart from a local bakery. Mom clapped her hands. She has such good taste, she beamed. Knows just what a gathering needs. I had been in the kitchen since 7 a.m. arranging platters. No one mentioned the avocado toast I'd made from scratch. Later that day, Dad motioned to me as I was leaving. "You should smile more, Lauren. Sometimes you make people feel like they're bothering you." I held the car keys a little tighter. I wasn't aware I'd made anyone uncomfortable. He adjusted his collar. Not uncomfortable. Just forgettable. I nodded. There wasn't a script for that reply. I used to think if I offered less resistance, if I bent without sound, I'd eventually be welcomed for my stillness. I thought that quiet could be persuasive, that if I were useful enough, invisible might become indispensable. But every effort faded into the outline of someone else's story. Every small Saturday, I stayed late. Every Sunday, I flew back early. Every holiday. I arrived with something in hand. I wasn't disruptive. I wasn't difficult. I was precise, measured, careful not to spill over, but nothing sticks if there's nowhere for it to land. And some rooms are designed to absorb everything without echo. I see that now. I used to believe that being remembered wasn't something you had to fight for. The Christmas card was pinned to the fridge with a ceramic snowman magnet. Gold foil trim, embossed script, Ashford family, holiday, 22. Emily stood in the center, her arm looped around Jake's shoulder, their parents on either side. There were 3 pine trees in the background, but only 4 people in the photo. I stared at it while pouring water into the kettle. Mom walked by with a grocery bag and paused behind me. "Oh," she said, "must have used an older photo. You know how fast those printers are." I nodded once and turned the burner on low. I remember what I wore that day. The same navy coat I'd worn to the tech roundtable in DC, the one where they introduced me as the architect of the regional health system dashboard. I had driven 4 hours to make it home for the family photo session, but maybe they took another one after I left, or maybe they never meant for me to be in it at all. Later that winter, I emailed a scanned letter from the State Technology Board. Appointed Lauren Ashford Senior Technical Advisor Public Access Subcommittee. I sent it to Mom's address, copying Dad and Emily. I wrote nothing in the body of the email, just attached the PDF and typed, "Thought you might want to know." No one replied. 2 days later, Emily posted a picture of a cappuccino at the Ritz-Carlton in Dubai. "Fuel before the big pitch," she wrote. 22 comments followed within the hour. "So proud of you. Global girl. Can't wait to hear more about the merger." I closed my inbox without refreshing. There was a birthday last year, Dad's 68th. Emily brought lemon cake with white chocolate curls. Miles arrived late with a bottle of scotch, and an apology that didn't require forgiveness. I came with a walnut frame wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a photo from a summer, long gone Dad on the porch swing with all 3 of us, me in the middle, with jelly on my chin. He unwrapped it carefully, held it at arm's length, then squinted. "We're not that sentimental anymore," he said. "But thanks." I set the frame on the mantel. It wasn't there the next time I visited. During dinner, someone spilled sparkling water on the tablecloth. I reached for napkins, blotting it quickly. Mom glanced over and said, "You've always been good at catching little messes. Maybe that's your role." I folded the napkin once then again until it could fit in my palm. Emily once gave a presentation at her firm, and the photo made it into the local business journal. Dad sent the clipping to our family group thread with a line that read, "That's what leadership looks like." No one commented. We were supposed to agree. I had spoken at a national summit the month before. The video was still on YouTube. I never shared it. At a Labor Day barbecue, I arrived early and helped set up chairs. Jake handed me a roll of tape for the name cards. I asked if there was one for me. He laughed and said, "Oh, didn't think you'd be here on time. But feel free to grab a blank one." I used a pen from my bag, wrote my name in lowercase letters, tucked it into the plastic holder without comment. Emily's card had calligraphy. Jake's had a small football sticker. Mine sat plain between the salt shaker and a bowl of potato chips. After everyone left, Mom collected the place cards and stacked them neatly on the sideboard. Except mine. She tossed it in the trash with the paper napkins. I didn't say anything. The first time I noticed I wasn't tagged in the family vacation album was the summer after college. The Facebook post had a photo of a beach house in Charleston. Caption, "One of our best family trips yet." I had been there. I had booked the house. The third comment read, "Who took the photo?" Emily replied, "Our cousin did. Lauren couldn't make it." I looked at my wrist. I still had the tan line from that weekend. Some memories sit like unfinished stitches unraveled, but still tugging. A birthday balloon without helium, a voicemail never returned, a name forgotten on the program. Dad once joked at a family dinner, "We've got 2 achievers and 1 mystery." The table laughed. I looked down at my plate and stirred my rice until it cooled. I used to think invisibility was accidental. That people simply forgot got busy meant well, but missed things, but forgetting has a rhythm. It happens in patterns, in photo frames that shift, in chairs not counted, in emails not opened. Maybe I've always been in the picture, just at the edge. Croppable. Maybe they didn't cut me out. Maybe they just zoomed in without me. I used to think a mission was a mistake, not a decision. The subject line didn't stand out at first. A system-generated email with a string of numbers and a polite header, revised stakeholder allocation. Ashford Family Trust. The logo in the corner belonged to a platform Dad once used for tax documents. I hovered over it before clicking. Thought maybe it was a duplicate notice. Maybe a form that accidentally looped me in. The PDF opened slowly. First the seal, then the names. Emily, Jake, Madeline, Ashford, Emily's daughter, age 7. My name wasn't there. Not in the list, not in the notes, not even in the footnotes. Page 2 held a short remark in faint grey font, Lauren Ashford previously listed under secondary beneficiary. Removed with consensus. I stared at the word consensus. 4 syllables with no weight unless you've been left out by it. I scrolled again. Checked every page as if names might shift positions when you blink. The envelope on my desk held utility receipts and a postcard from Becca. I pulled the corner of the card out, her handwriting still loopy, still blue. "Let's breathe this quarter." "Okay." I picked up the phone and dialed the only number I still knew by heart. He answered after the second ring. "Lauren," he said flatly, "I was going to call you this week." The line crackled with air, not static. I waited. He cleared his throat. "It's just paperwork." No one meant harm. I didn't interrupt. Your mother and I, we assumed it wouldn't matter to you. You're doing fine, right? You've always been stable." The word sat too neatly, a coat buttoned by someone else's hands. I reached for a chipped mug that still smelled faintly of mint. "I'm doing fine," I said. "That's why you thought I didn't count." He paused again. It wasn't about counting. I looked at the email still open on my screen. The list didn't lie. It never is. That's what makes it easier. The silence that followed was uneven. Not long enough to be thoughtful. Not short enough to pretend nothing had happened. Then he ended the call. I didn't save the document. I didn't print it. But I didn't delete it either. That evening, a message came through the family thread. Emily had posted a photo of Dad smiling beside a row of hydrangeas. "Finally planted the blue ones," she wrote. Jake responded with a thumbs up. Mom added, "He looks so proud." No one mentioned the update. No one sent a separate note, not even a courtesy text. There's a paperweight on my bookshelf, a clear cube filled with crushed copper foil. It was a gift from a conference 5 years ago, something handed out with lanyards and tote bags. I've never used it, but I never threw it away. That night, I placed it on top of the unopened envelope that held my old copy of the trust, the one they must have revised without telling me. The copper caught the light from the desk lamp, throwing off faint reflections like a quiet celebration for someone else. A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was airy, like she'd stepped out of a spa. We wanted to keep things clean, less complicated. She didn't say my name. She never did in hard conversations. "You've got your own things now. Emily has the house Jake's still settling." It just made sense. I could hear dishes in the background, running water, a drawer sliding shut. "You always said you didn't need much." I looked at the corner of my room where my extra chair stood empty, beige cushion slightly wrinkled from no one sitting in it. Maybe I believed it, because it was easier than asking. She exhaled like she'd finished something, a task checked off. "Just focus on your work. That's where you shine." The line disconnected before I could respond. Not abruptly, just efficiently. A week passed, then 2. No follow-up, no apology. No envelope, with a copy of the revision, even out of formality. At some point, Becca asked if I was okay. I didn't answer directly. "They've restructured the trust." She blinked slowly. "And you was restructured out." She didn't reply. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out a granola bar, the same kind I used to stock in our dorm kitchen. "You always gave those away," she murmured. "Because no one remembered they were mine," she nodded. "Unwrapped one, broke it in half. Neither of us ate it." I didn't tell anyone else. Not because I was hiding, just because I finally understood what silence confirms. Not all doors close with a bang. Some simply never open again. I kept the email in the archive folder, not for legal reasons, not for proof, just as a way to remember the difference between being overlooked and being deliberately removed. One implies error, the other implies clarity. I used to believe that disappearing would feel like falling. I didn't send an email, not to clarify, not to question, not to remind anyone what had been erased. The thread with the revised trust sat unopened in my inbox, like a letter addressed to someone I no longer resembled. I moved it to a folder titled Simply archived. I didn't label it with anything more. I didn't need to. The group chat was next. I read through the last few exchanges plans for Emily's promotion party, a photo of Jake's new car, an emoji chain from Mom reacting to someone's dessert. My name hadn't appeared in weeks, not even as an afterthought. I tapped Leave Group. The phone asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. The quiet that followed was not dramatic. No one messaged asking why. No one added me back. The silence held its shape unbothered by my absence. I found the spare house key at the bottom of my drawer. It was still in the shape of a dog bone. Jake had chosen it when we were teenagers. The label was smudged, but the word Lauren was still visible in faded Sharpie. I placed it in a small envelope and walked it to the Ashford mailbox. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. The slot opened and closed with a soft click, like a drawer being shut carefully. 3 days passed, then a text. "Are you upset about the paperwork? It's complicated. We didn't mean anything." No greeting. No punctuation after Lauren. I stared at the message. The screen dimmed before I could decide what it required from me. I didn't respond. The envelope had not been returned. Becca noticed before anyone else. She came by with her laptop, balancing a takeout coffee on a stack of sketchbooks. We worked quietly for a while, coding revisions between muted Spotify ads. At one point she glanced over the rim of her cup. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. Then I clicked save, shut the laptop, and folded my hands over the grain of the table. I think I said slowly, "I've been sitting at a table where no one ever set a place for me." Becca didn't speak. She slid one of the sketchbooks across to me. On the inside cover she'd written, "Build quietly, rest deeply, exit clean." I nodded. We didn't speak again for the rest of the hour. Later that night, I opened the box under my bed. It held old ID badges, printouts of early product diagrams, and a white nameplate that once sat on my desk at a job I outgrew. I added a new item, the Sharpie-labeled key envelope, now slightly bent at the corner. I didn't tape it closed. I logged into the shared Ashford email calendar. Birthday reminders, holiday lists, addresses for thank you cards. I unchecked the sync box and hit unsubscribe. Nothing happened. No one called. Mom used to say I was independent, even as a child. "You never needed us the way the others did," she once told me. I think what she meant was you never required attention. We weren't prepared to give. There was always a quiet in our house, but not the soft kind. Not the kind you notice and admire, the kind that waits for you to give up asking. When I was 9, I got the flu. I stayed home alone for 2 days while Emily rehearsed a piano solo and Jake had basketball practice. Mom left crackers and orange juice on the kitchen counter with a note, "Rest. Don't call unless you have a fever over 1." I kept the thermometer in my pocket all day just in case. The next week she praised me for being so low maintenance. I didn't know then that it would become a title I couldn't shake. Becca once told me the opposite of love isn't hate, it's disregard. I hadn't known what to say, but I wrote the word down in my notes app and stared at it for days. Dad didn't call. Emily didn't write. Jake didn't send a meme or a one-word message like he sometimes did when he was bored or trying to avoid small talk. There was only the hum of my laptop, the measured heat from the kettle, the stillness that no longer asked to be broken. I made a new desk nameplate, brass. No frills, no role listed, just the initials L.E. A name I hadn't yet claimed out loud, but had begun writing in the margins of my notebooks. The old plastic one, cracked at one corner, went into the trash. I didn't double-check if it had been collected. One morning, I saw Mom had posted a photo of her garden. Spring always makes room for what's meant to stay. The caption didn't bother me, but I noticed the comments section. 32 hearts. Multiple remarks about beauty growth family. My name wasn't among them. Becca texted that afternoon. Did they ask no? Will you tell them no? She didn't reply, but I knew she understood. Some departures don't need an announcement. Some rooms don't deserve a final word. When you spend long enough proving your worth to people who only measure presence when it's convenient, silence becomes not a reaction, but a boundary. I didn't leave with noise. I didn't burn bridges or lock doors. I just stepped out of a house that never noticed I was standing. And for the first time, no one followed. And that meant I was finally free to stop waiting. I used to think space was something people gave you. The apartment wasn't large, but it didn't echo. The walls were bare, except for one small photo of a trailhead in Olympic National Park. I hadn't taken the photo. I bought it at a thrift shop because the colors reminded me of air that hasn't been named yet. The only furniture that came with me was a wooden table with uneven legs. I wedged a folded receipt under one side to keep it steady. The first thing I placed on it was a mint-colored mug chipped slightly at the rim. That morning, I wrote product notes by hand. The digital version sat untouched on my desktop, but I wanted the feel of paper, the scribble of ink, the edge of each square in the graph pad. I drew boxes, scratched out lines, rewrote them in smaller letters. Each mistake stayed visible. The tea tasted clean but uncertain. Peppermint steeped 5 minutes too long. I let it cool on the windowsill while I checked the layout of a new user dashboard. Outside, the branches barely moved. No traffic, no movement, just a kind of held breath. No one called. There was no group thread, no birthday reminders, no planning messages that forgot to include me. I logged into the back end of the client system and adjusted a permissions schema. The change was minor. No one would notice except the one administrator who always sent over requests a day too late. He'd find it faster now. That was enough. In the evening, I folded a grey hoodie and placed it on the wall hook. The fabric was thinned at the elbows, a frayed seam along the wrist. I had worn it the night I signed our first non-profit contract, sitting on the floor of our old office in borrowed space above a dance studio. We had no chairs, just cardboard boxes and warm pizza. No one in my family knew about that night. Mom had called earlier that week and told me Emily was flying to Zurich. "She's leading a strategy call. Can you believe that I had nodded though she couldn't see me?" Then she added, "You still working on that little system of yours?" I had said yes. Just yes. She didn't ask for more. The hoodie used to carry the scent of ramen broth and toner ink. Now it just smelled like old cotton. I looked at the folds and thought, this is mine. Not in the possessive sense, more in the way you recognize a word that used to sound foreign. The automatic coffee machine made a soft mechanical sound the next morning, not loud enough to fill the room, but present. I watched the steam rise slowly. No one else would drink it. I didn't need to make conversation to justify its flavor. The silence in the apartment was whole, not a gap, not a pause, a thing in itself. I once thought silence only meant absence, but here it had contour, a rhythm, the whir of the laptop fan, the thud of my heel hitting the wood as I shifted in the chair, the click of my pen. When I used to write code late at night in my old apartment, I'd leave the television on low. The sound of voices, even distant, made the work feel less lonely. Now, I preferred the shift of my own thoughts. There was nothing to mask. The fridge hummed. The mug left a faint ring on the windowsill. I went 2 weeks without hearing my name spoken out loud. I didn't miss it. I checked my calendar once out of habit. Emily's name was still tagged on a shared event Q3 dinner. Tentative. I hovered for a moment, then deleted the whole entry. I didn't replace it. The lavender plant Becca gave me had started to lean. I turned it gently toward the window. The soil smelled faintly of rain and iron. There had been a time when I sent photos of my plants to Mom. She never replied, but once she told Aunt Carol that Lauren always keeps busy with small things. The small things now filled my day. I made toast with sea salt butter. I dusted the top of the fridge. I organized paper clips by color. None of it was remarkable. None of it needed to be. In the middle of a Tuesday, Becca texted a line of code she'd broken and couldn't trace. "Do you remember how we handled variable keys in v2.3? I replied with a screenshot and the note, "Try isolating the error before the filter. It's not in your logic, it's in the assumption." She sent back a thumbs up and a period. No emojis. No praise. That was enough. I didn't tell her I'd slept 4 hours the night before. Not because I was upset, just because I'd been reading about open-source data for city planning. I found a paragraph that used the phrase constructive friction, and I copied it into a notebook. It reminded me of Becca's post-it. There was no celebration, no voice from down the hall, no chair to pull closer, but I didn't need applause for breathing. I didn't need proof that stillness could be sacred. This place had no portraits, no trophies, no invitations curling at the corners. It didn't smell like memory. It didn't echo with names I didn't choose. It only had one thing. And for the first time, that was more than enough. I used to think if they reached out again, it would mean something had changed. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter screen, pulsing with a name I hadn't seen in months. Margaret Ashford. I let it vibrate until the sound faded, then picked it up before it went to voicemail. Her voice came through evenly like a nurse reading vitals. "Are you free next Saturday? We'd like you to join the family BBQ." No apology, no mention of missed birthdays, unanswered texts, or the trust documents I never signed. Just a date and a casual request, as though absence rewrote nothing. Emily's being considered for a major position at Mira Data. Senior Director of Global Strategy. Charles Reynolds will be there. I remembered Charles. We'd served together on a federal ethics review board 6 years ago. He'd spoken over me twice, then shook my hand without remembering we'd met. Back then, I let it pass. The kind of forgetting that leaves no bruise, just an echo. Margaret continued. "We want to show him we're a strong family, full circle, not healed, not whole, just composed, enough to be photographed in soft lighting and posted with the right filter." I glanced toward the shelf across from me, a small framed certificate from the early days of Ashford Systems. It was slightly off-center, leaned against a stone bookend. I had once mailed a copy to Dad. He never opened it. Said mail got misplaced when Emily moved back in for a few weeks. Later that evening, Jake messaged. "Short, informal, unpunctuated. Can you show up just for optics? It's important for Emily. Not a request. Not an invitation. A logistical need." I stared at the message. The phone screen had a thin crack in the corner from a night it slipped off the counter. I hadn't bothered to fix it. Some damage wasn't worth disguising. I typed slowly, "I'm not a prop." The typing bubble appeared for a moment, then vanished. The next morning I ordered mint tea from the corner shop. The barista knew my name. I sat by the window, the paper cup warm against my hands. There was a small stain on the lid from where the peppermint oil had soaked through. I didn't wipe it away. It made the cup feel less manufactured. At home, I sorted old documents into 2 piles, reference and discard. A folded flyer slipped out from between the pages of a notebook. It was from an event Emily and I had once spoken at, back when she still introduced me as her sister instead of her family's tech advisor. My name was misspelled. I had laughed about it then. I didn't now. I didn't iron anything that week. I didn't check the weather. I didn't look for Tupperware to carry salad or fruit. I knew better than to think they wanted a contribution. Midweek. Becca stopped by. She was reviewing design mock-ups, but glanced at my untouched tea and the blue pen I kept twirling between my fingers. You heard from them? I nodded. What's the ask? They need a table to look full. She didn't say anything else, just slid the sketch across the desk and waited while I reviewed it. That night, I opened the closet and touched the edge of a soft grey blouse I used to wear to early pitch meetings. It still had a coffee stain near the hem from a morning I rushed to get to Dad's keynote. He hadn't acknowledged me in the audience. Emily had saved him a seat at the front. I kept the blouse. The stain reminded me that I had shown up, whether they noticed or not. Thursday came with a text from Margaret. It had no greeting. 2 p.m. sharp. Saturday. Bring something light. No warmth. No invitation. A directive. Like I was part of an itinerary, not a family. I didn't answer. The air in the apartment was cool that evening. The ceiling fan clicked with each slow rotation. I let the sound count itself. I imagined the folding chairs, the perfectly spaced napkins, the polite laughter. I saw my place in it not beside them, but slightly behind, angled to fill a frame. The kind of presence that proved nothing but symmetry. Some silences are meant to be broken. Others are boundaries. When they reached again, it wasn't because they missed me. It was because the image required completion. Becca called the next morning to review launch timelines. Before hanging up, she said quietly, "You don't owe them clarity. I know I said." Still, she added, "I hope you leave space for your own reflection in whatever picture they try to take. I didn't show up on Saturday. No one called. No one followed up. There was no fallout, no confrontation, just stillness." I folded the invitation card in half and slid it into the back of a drawer, not to save it, but to remind myself that not every gesture deserves a reply. And when the silence settled again, it didn't feel empty. It felt like air finally allowed to fill the room. I used to rush the morning. Now I let it take its time. The sound of the kettle finishing its cycle has a different rhythm than the old office coffee machine. That one had a constant whir, always grinding, always pouring. This one hisses once, then quiets. I measure out the grounds by hand, not the pre-filled pods. I read somewhere once that bitter beans come from poor timing. I check my inbox. There's a status update from the regional hospital network. The pilot for the rural data bridge is showing early signs of success. Lower wait times, fewer duplicate entries, clearer imaging reports. I forward notes to the engineering team with 3 brief suggestions and 1 word. Thanks. The mug I use now is heavier than the old one. It's chipped at the base, a clean crescent missing from when I tapped it against the kitchen sink too hard. I kept it. It steadies the weight in my hand. My planner has no tabs, no color-coded labels, just clean pages and pencil lines. Monday afternoons are blocked for mentoring sessions at a non-profit downtown. 4 young engineers come in with questions about systems architecture and leave asking about time zones burnout, the dignity of quiet design. Last week, one of them asked how I handled legacy systems that were too big to fix. I circled the word legacy and passed him the pen. Becca stopped by after lunch. She brought a sandwich and leaned against the door frame, eyes skimming the whiteboard while I typed. "You look different." I turned toward her without speaking. "Not soft," she continued. "Just settled, like a kettle off the boil." The comment hung in the air longer than it needed to. Then she changed the subject, started unpacking our campaign timeline. The window behind her was streaked from last night's rain. I hadn't noticed until then. The hoodie I wore today was one I used to keep in my office drawer. It still smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the hand lotion I'd stored in the same bin. I found it last month when unpacking an old box labeled Q1, Q2 performance notes. There were no names on the folders inside, just dates and a red binder clip. I didn't reread the reports. I shredded them, kept the hoodie. A message arrived late that afternoon. "Jake, did you really found Ashford Systems?" I stared at the screen. His name in bold font, the message sitting unread for exactly 12 seconds. Then I opened it. Yes. A few minutes passed, didn't know. Just wanted to say, "You're good. Better than we gave you credit for." No punctuation, no follow-up. I didn't reply. There was nothing sharp in his words, no apology, no concession, just the muted sound of someone catching up to a truth long buried. Later that evening, I walked to the corner market. I didn't need anything urgent, just bread, maybe tea. The aisle with notebooks caught my eye. I picked up a black one with a cloth spine smooth and unfamiliar. The pages didn't remind me of anything. That's why I bought it. Back home, I folded laundry. The shirt with the frayed sleeve had held its color better than expected. It used to be part of my rotation for client meetings. No one had ever complimented it, but it always made me feel aligned. That night, I reviewed the draft proposal for our open source initiative. I added 2 sentences and deleted 1. Precision has weight. I've learned that now. There was a moment somewhere between page 4 and 5 where I remembered something Margaret used to say when I lingered at the dinner table too long. "Lauren, don't sit where you aren't needed." It was never said with malice, just clarity, like someone pointing out a chair already claimed. I used to shrink in those moments, adjust myself, fold smaller. Now I recognize them for what they are, warnings disguised as etiquette. At the mentoring session the following week, a young woman named Tasha lingered after everyone else had packed up. "You make it look easy," she said, brushing lint from her sleeve. "It isn't." She smiled, nodded once, then left without asking more. I liked that. In the quiet that followed, I sat with a pen in hand, open notebook in front of me. I didn't write. Just let the ink seep slightly into the page before capping the pen again. Some transitions don't announce themselves. No drum roll, no flash. Just the way your hand no longer shakes when signing your name, or how no one asks anymore whether you're coming to dinner because they know the answer, and they know it's not silence out of protest, but out of choice. I looked at my phone again. Jake's message still sat there unread a second time. I didn't delete it. I didn't need to. Some acknowledgements arrive too late to matter, and exactly on time for peace. Some declarations require no audience. I folded the letter once then again until it fit cleanly into the brown envelope. The paper had weight not from its texture, but from what it no longer needed to prove. I didn't write more than I had to. Please remove me from all future estate planning. This is not an act of rebellion. This is clarity. The sentence sat centered on the page. No justification. No footnotes, no warmth. I chose blue ink not out of sentiment, but because black felt too corporate. The pen wasn't from a set, just a regular capped fountain pen I'd used once to sign my first consulting contract. I still remembered how the ink bled a little on the corner that day. This time, it didn't. The form beside the letter was standard withdrawal from Ashford Family Trust. Beneficiary opt-out. I had requested it quietly from the attorney 2 months earlier. He didn't ask why, just mailed it with a yellow sticky note that read, "If you're sure." I had waited until now to be sure. No scan, no email, no trail to trace online. I printed a label and went to the post office. The clerk didn't ask what was inside, only circled the tracking number. Certified, signature required. I nodded once, took the receipt, and walked out. I didn't tell anyone I had sent it. Not Becca. Not even the HR assistant who processed my name change the following week. I opened the internal system, clicked on legal records, and typed slowly under last name Whitlow. It didn't feel like erasure. It felt like completion. My grandmother used to write her name in faded ink inside the covers of borrowed books. So, they know whose hands touched it, she once told me, pressing a copy of To Build a Fire into mine. If it comes back to me, it comes back knowing I existed. That name came from her side, the one no one quoted at reunions, the one that made cornbread without measuring, and sent me birthday cards with taped leaves instead of glitter. She never raised her voice, never offered praise too early. But she looked at me like I was whole, even when I didn't speak. When Becca saw the nameplate outside my office, she paused. "You didn't tell me. I didn't need to." She tapped the glass once, as if the name was still settling in. "Whitlow." She'd be proud. She never asked me to be anything else. That was the end of it. The envelope arrived at my parents' home on a Thursday. I knew because the tracking updated at 11:06 a.m. Delivered. Left with individual. No signature photo. No follow-up. I pictured it lying unopened next to magazines no one subscribed to and credit card offers that said, "Urgent," a name they no longer used, a message they didn't expect. No one called. Not even Jake. But 2 days later, a message popped up in the old family thread. Holiday dinner. Head count needed. Emily's boss is bringing guests. Mom says RSVP by Sunday. I stared at the screen. There was no greeting. No mention of names. Just logistics. As if the table would set itself. Jake followed up privately. Saw the change, just wondering why now. It was overdue. He paused, typing bubble, gone typing again. Didn't think you'd actually leave the trust. I didn't leave, I never belonged. The reply came a minute later. She says you're being dramatic. I didn't answer. A day passed, then 2. The silence didn't sting this time. It felt measured, expected. That Sunday, I pulled out a file folder labeled LW Records and slipped the certified mail receipt inside. No red stamp, no rejection, just evidence that it had been sent. I took the old Ashford boardroom badge from the back of my drawer, the one with my photo hair pinned up too tightly, name printed in all caps. I didn't toss it. I wrapped it in a grey dish towel and tucked it under a box of cables I no longer used. Some objects don't need destruction, just distance. There was a voicemail from my mother Monday afternoon. I didn't listen to it, just read the auto transcript. Her words were clipped like she was dictating to an assistant. If this is about what we said that day, well, you always took things too literally. Then nothing. No question. No, it called me back. I deleted it. Later that week, I cleaned out the hallway closet and found a navy hoodie I hadn't worn in years. The tag still faintly showed my initials sewn in by my grandmother. It smelled faintly of peppermint and ink. It was the one I wore to my first client pitch. The one no one remembered, the one no one asked about. I folded it and placed it in a box labelled Keep. Becca brought coffee the next morning. She glanced at the folder on my desk with the updated documents and smiled, but didn't say anything. She just handed me a black mug with no logo and sat across from me in silence. Did it feel like cutting ties? She finally said, almost to the window. No, more like returning keys that were never mine. I never understood why they needed you to fit so tightly into their frame, because their picture wasn't complete without someone quiet in the background. Becca stirred her drink with a pen cap. Do you think they'll ever read it? They don't need to. It wasn't for them. The clock ticked behind us. She didn't ask anything else. I didn't offer more. That afternoon I updated my emergency contact at work, removed my parents' names, left the space blank. Not out of spite, just out of accuracy. I no longer count mornings in tasks. The kettle clicked before the water fully boiled, and I let it. A few mint leaves swirled in the bottom of a chipped ceramic cup, one I hadn't bought for guests, just one that fit the weight of my hand. I hadn't planned anything dramatic. I just wanted to steep the leaves slowly and sit with them. Steam traced thin ribbons up into the quiet. I watched it curl and vanish. On the table the laptop blinked once, then stopped. No meetings, no flashing calendar blocks. The only thing waiting was the folder titled Community Partnership Review. I dragged it open and sipped the tea before it cooled too far. The taste wasn't sharp this time, just enough green to remind me the leaves had been alive once. Outside the curtains stirred gently. A breeze carried in the sound of someone walking their dog collar, jingling no urgency in the footsteps. Nothing pressed in. No one called out my name like it was missing from something important. No one asked where I had gone. Tucked beneath my mousepad was a cream envelope, not addressed, just titled Family Gathering, April. I had opened it once to glance at the card inside. The handwriting wasn't mine. It was my mother's, steady and practiced. Margaret, George, Emily, Jake. Those 4 names signed at the bottom stacked like a list of shareholders. Nothing beneath them. No, we hope to see you. No scribbled note asking how I'd been. I slid the card into the bottom drawer, not out of spite, just filing it the way I'd file a receipt from a store I wouldn't return to. The spoon next to the cup had a small dent near the handle, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. I had used that spoon the day I signed the partnership with the Pacific Education Collaborative. No ribbon cutting, no applause, just a quiet approval from the board and a shared belief in teaching without extraction. On the screen, the presentation waited. I clicked through the slides until the new slogan appeared in the corner, right-aligned and grey-billed quietly. Led by making space for others. That line had taken me months to distill, not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I didn't want to pretend anymore, not to sponsors, not to my family, not to myself. In my mind, I still heard Emily's voice from years ago. Don't try so hard. You're not the face we'd lead with. It hadn't been said with venom. That's what made it stick. It had been casual, procedural, like sorting through a deck and discarding a card that didn't belong in the final hand. I kept working through the notes, adjusting timelines, smoothing edges. I didn't send status updates. Becca already knew I would finish by Thursday. A message blinked on my phone. Emily. Lunch next week. No context, no apology, no acknowledgement of the certified envelope I had mailed weeks ago. I stared at the screen. The background image was still the same frosted leaves I'd photographed on a morning hike alone months ago. The frost had made the greens silver. Everything looked preserved, untouched. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the message either. I slid the phone face down. In the afternoon, I walked to the park near the Fremont Bridge. Children dashed around, the fountain voices rising, then dissolving like foam. An elderly woman in a mustard coat sat crocheting with a skein of pale yarn. Her hands moved in patterns only she understood. No one knew me here, not as Ashford, not even as Whitlow. I had become a woman who simply took up her own square of the bench, who didn't owe anyone a performance. I pulled out the leather notebook I'd started keeping again. The front page was already filled. On the next page I wrote, "Success is not a table. It's the space you carve for yourself when no one else sets a seat." The ink bled slightly on the corner of the S. I didn't blot it. Somewhere nearby, a young man laughed and dropped a coffee cup. The lid bounced once before rolling into the grass. He didn't notice. When I returned home, the apartment held the same quiet as when I left. The kettle hadn't moved. The curtains swayed once, then stilled. Another message waited, this one from Becca. "Emily just messaged me. Asked if you'd be open to lunch someday." I didn't answer. I replied, "Tell her I'm well. That's enough for now." No ellipsis, no invitation. I put the phone down and reached for the cup again. Still warm. The mint leaves had sunk. One floated halfway down, curled like a comma that didn't lead anywhere. Years ago, my mother had once told me, don't confuse being capable with being indispensable. She'd said it when I had built the first prototype of the Ashford analytics dashboard on my own. The implication hung like fog. Capable women were useful, but replaceable. She hadn't congratulated me on the deal. She had offered instead, "You always make things harder than they need to be." Even now, I could picture her bracelets tapping against the counter as she flipped through mail that mattered to her. The weight of my name never seemed to land, and still, I hadn't erased her name from my contacts. I just no longer waited for it to flash on the screen. The mail that came this week was ordinary. A water bill, a thank you letter from a non-profit, a small envelope from a bookstore confirming my donation to the Community Shelf Project. I ran my thumb over the bookstore's logo, an imprint of an open palm holding a folded paper crane. I hadn't bought a single bestseller in 6 months. Only books about things I wanted to understand, collective data, ethics, ancient textile patterns, silent revolutions. One night years ago, Emily had told me during dinner, "You read too much into everything. No one's watching that closely." Maybe she was right. Maybe they never were. But I was. Not in a way that demanded anything from them. Just enough to choose what I no longer needed to carry. The apartment didn't echo anymore. I had filled the corners not with objects, but with time, with tea, with paper that didn't require signatures. There was no applause, just the slight click of the drawer closing with the invitation still inside. And that was enough.